Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and you're watching The Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm coming back at you with another list video, another top 10 so to speak. Today we're going to be looking at 10 comic books I wish I could read again for the first time. I did a short on this the other week and I wanted to do a more expanded video. I did mix up some of the comics because there's so much more than 10 that I wish I could read for the first time. Anyway, I thought this would be a fun prompt for a video. I hope you enjoy it. Before we jump in though, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. There's a link for it in the video description. If you find something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's an amazing way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. Kicking off our list today in no particular order, we have Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. Taking a look at this, I am looking at volume 1 of my Ultimate collection here. The entire run from Bendis' Daredevil was collected across 3 of these paperback Ultimate collections, or I believe 2 omnibus editions, and there's also smaller trade paperbacks that have been collected, things like that. Anyway, this is for me my favorite superhero comic run I have ever had the pleasure of reading thus far. I think about it quite often, and it's something that completely shifted how I viewed this character. I think it was after this run that I really started to consider old Hornhead here, Daredevil, my favorite superhero. I absolutely love the gritty kind of realism that Bendis brought to this book. I think Maleev's artwork absolutely aided in that as well. This volume does showcase some other artists as well, like David Mack and that first story arc that has the kind of painted look to it. At any rate, I really just think that this is a fantastic comic. We have some really important chapters of Matt Murdock, Daredevil's storyline that happen in this run. I love the more gritty feel of this. The fact that everything feels like a crime drama. It's definitely more into that kind of noir genre than even superhero genre, in my opinion. And I think that that just really works for a character like this. I think the artwork is absolutely next level, and this was just such a transformative experience for me as a comic book reader. It made me want to double down with this hobby in a way that's hard for me to express. I think because of all of this and the way that this shaped this character is one of my all-time favorites in fiction, I have to say I wish I could read this again for the first time. I would love to hear what you all think of Bendis' run on Daredevil. I know for me, as you've definitely heard me gushing, I am a huge fan of it. And even flipping through this collection now, I can remember so fondly what it was like when I was first reading these stories. Loved it. Highly recommend it. Next up on our list today, Spider-Man Blue by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. This is part of that great Marvel Color series that these two creators brought to us, and for my money, it's easily one of my favorites. What this story is about, for those that haven't read it, is it's basically Spider-Man, I believe on Valentine's Day, remembering a lost love, the person of Gwen Stacy, who he lost tragically at the hands of his enemies years and years ago. It's basically him remembering, and even though he's now happily with Mary Jane Watson, they're in a great relationship, he still remembers this love that was lost to him. And this whole series is him remembering his time with Gwen, that season of his life when he was first falling in love with her, what his friend group was like, what it was like being Spider-Man during this time. And each of these issues inside represent a kind of voice recording he's doing on his own in his attic, just remembering and kind of in his own way eulogizing or speaking to Gwen Stacy. And I really just love this book. This whole thing has this, again, kind of melancholy feel to it. There is this kind of sappy romantic beauty to this whole work. I think Tim Sale's artwork is absolutely moody as well. We have his trademark styles in full effect here. And frankly, I just love to see how he does his own interpretation of our favorite web-headed wall crawler. This book is something that was so special to me when I read it. I think I teared up a little bit, if I'm honest with you. To me, it's a highlight reel of what makes Spider-Man so great. We have a great, colorful cast of characters and villain characters. We have just so much of Spider-Man's personality and humor in it, but we also have that deep sense of tragedy. I think Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale were able to distill Spider-Man down to his basic essence, and this is just such a great showcasing of not only the history of Spider-Man, but all Spider-Man can be. I will never forget reading this, and I wish I could go back and read it again for the very first time. And hey, before we get to our next entry, if you're watching this video and you have yet to subscribe to the channel, I want to encourage you to do so. I'm always releasing list videos, comic book reviews, shorts, community posts, and so much more. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's keep this list going. Next on our list of comics I wish I could read again for the first time, House of X Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman. This is what started it all with that new Dawn of X Krakoa era of X-Men storytelling. For a lot of people, this was a definitive chapter for the X-Men that kickstarted a great run on not only X-Men, but all of the adjacent X books. For others, they may be burnt out by the Krakoa era. I, for one, have been a really big fan. But nothing to me has reached the pinnacle of that era of storytelling than what started it all with these pages within House of X Powers of 10. To me, this is a definitive Jonathan Hickman work, which is saying something, as his whole bibliography is just iconic and epically scoped in my mind. So this storyline just really got me back into the world of X-Men in a big bad way. It kicked off not only my love for modern day X-Men, but it really made me want to jumpstart and go back proper and start reading the Chris Claremont run, which I have started doing. I've reviewed some of his omnibuses on the channel. Anyway, I've really loved going through X-Men these recent years, and I really have Jonathan Hickman to blame in this little book here. For those that maybe don't know about it, this completely resets the status quo for X-Men and kind of revolutionizes everything we know about the mutants so far. We have them kind of creating their own nation in Krakoa, and it really just sets up the mutants as a kind of global superpower. And I think that it's just such a fundamental shift in how we look at X-Men books that I really just love it for everything it's inspired so far. But the work itself is an absolute wonder. We have so many different timelines and all of these different storylines and subplots and science fiction tropes, all just being wielded by a master storyteller. The scope of the storyline itself is absolutely gigantic, cinematic, epic, but it all just really works. I absolutely was floored by everything Jonathan Hickman did here, and if I could read it again for the first time, well, frankly, I would not hesitate at a chance to do so. If you haven't read House of X Powers of 10, now's your chance. Next today, we have Robert Kirkman's Invincible over at Image Comics. This is a property that has always had some pretty good media attention, but it's now getting a lot more mainstream appeal after the success of the animated series that we've had going on here. At any rate, I had the opportunity to finally finish all of Invincible earlier this year, and man, what a ride. For those that don't know, Robert Kirkman is one of our industry's top creators here. He's not only done this work here, but he's also very famous for things like The Walking Dead. One of my favorite aspects of Kirkman's writing is he can take a fairly simple sounding synopsis and make it very intricate and twist it in unexpected ways. He has a really commanding grasp of characters and drama in a way that I can follow any storyline he's doing for the most part and be so gripped because I am just that glued into the central characters. And that's absolutely true here in the series Invincible. You come to care for not only the heroes, but a good deal of the villains. This is at its basics a straightforward superhero origin story, a superhero narrative. We have this series' central hero, Mark Grayson, Invincible. He has a lot of the same power sets as someone like Superman, flight, durability, super strength, and he just wants to save the day. The series begins as kind of a slice of life character study that happens to just follow some superhero characters, and it evolves into something so much more than that. I cannot tell you how much this storyline affected me. It's an absolute wonder, and I think now that I've finished this entire run, this is an ultimate collection here. It's a oversized hardcover set that has over like about a dozen issues. There are 12 of these volumes that comprise the entire run, and after I finished all of them, I just wished I could go back and read it again for the first time, not knowing some of the plot spoilers and the twists and turns, and just was able to just ride the ride again. I know I sound redundant, but honestly, this was just such a fantastic superhero story with truly, truly memorable characters. It's so hard not to be just absolutely sucked into Invincible. If you've never read the series, and maybe you're a fan of the TV show, it's time to start the comics. Definitely check it out for yourself. Next up on my list, perhaps my most surprising entry, I'm going to be talking about Morning Glories by Nick Spencer and Joe Yzma, again from Image Comics. This is an incredible oversized deluxe edition. I did review this on my channel. A couple things to know about this series before I talk about it more. This is an unfinished series. It has been on hiatus for so long. I think it's on hiatus indefinitely. I really hope that someday Joe Yzma and Nick Spencer can go back to this title because I want to finish the storyline. But even with it unfinished, I can absolutely put it on my list for stories I could read again for the first time. This is one of the earlier, kind of more independent stories I ever read in this comic book medium, and I was absolutely hooked from the first issue. This is basically a story of a kind of, let's call it a boarding school for like really gifted children, but the boarding school is super odd. There's so many different like science fiction, supernatural kind of threats, story tropes, devices here at play, and we have this kind of suspense, thriller, mystery kind of story. It's all these young adults who are at this boarding school trying to survive. There's so many weird happenings. There's monsters, possibly some kind of time travel. There's so many unexplained questions throughout it that I was hooked. This reminds me a lot. It's like the comic book equivalent of a similar genre as something like the television show Lost, which admittedly I was and still am a huge fan of. Yes, even the finale. That being said, this comic book series is one to remember. Again, I think being one of my earliest, more indie titles, it was going to stick with me no matter what, but I think the writing was really sharp, all the characters felt very, very distinctive, and the artwork was just gorgeous. Yzma has a unique visual style that I haven't seen replicated in our medium here, but it's one I think about often. I really dream for the day they finish this series, but for now, all I can do is look back and think, wow, I wish I could read these early issues again for the very, very first time. Also, quick note, just want to apologize for the weird lighting that's starting to bleed into the video here. I'm kind of limited to when I can film these days, being a parent to two young children, doing what I can here, but it looks like we got a little bit of kind of glare here. I apologize, hope it doesn't distract too much. Moving right along here with the list, I'm going to be talking about Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley from Marvel Comics. To do that, I have the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1. So elated this came out in recent years. Love revisiting the storyline in this oversized format. So for those that don't know, in the early 2000s, Marvel made a separate universe. Yes, not the mainstream 616 Marvel universe, but its own separate universe to relaunch a lot of these books in more contemporary times. And this to me is the all-star runaway hit of this whole initiative, of course, Ultimate Spider-Man. It completely reboots, relaunches the whole Spider-Man origin. Instead of doing a quick one-issue origin, we have like a 6-issue origin story arc, and this is a newer Spider-Man who's a 2000s era high schooler rather than someone in like the 60s, and it's more fresh. I mean, even now in 2023 at the time of the recording, it is already dated again overall, but I think that this is a much fresher take on Spider-Man and his early adventures. Being in kind of an alternate universe, it's also really fun to see the different spins we have on iconic characters and even iconic Spider-Man storylines. We have a lot of these homages to the main 616 universe, but it's almost like it's remixed or handled in slightly different ways. Some of the alterations to the characters I found fascinating as a longer-term Spider-Man fan, but at the same time, I think that this is one of my favorite starting places for brand new readers when I recommend something to them, especially for Spider-Man. You can have no pre-existing knowledge of Spider-Man and get in on the ground floor of this run, and this run is really self-contained, beginning, middle, and end across, what's going to be a couple omnibuses once it's done, but that initial 100-something issue run is really a closed series for all intents and purposes, not including Miles Morales and the spin-offs after that, but you can read it beginning, middle, and end. It's an absolute wonder of a book. I just cannot tell you how many emotions I had reading it, and I wish I could go back again and read it for the first time. Next up, we have more Jonathan Hickman with Fantastic Four by Jonathan Hickman. This is the first omnibus of a 2-volume omnibus set that I have, and this contains the entire run of his time on Fantastic Four across these 2 volumes. But it kicks off here, and I will say, new readers can jump right into this and not feel like they're missing all that much. Yes, there's some busy happenings within the Marvel Universe at a time, but you don't need to know too much to just really dive in. One of the things I love about Hickman's story here is that it is massive in scope. It is a just epic science fiction adventure. I think for people that are looking for something so much more than a superhero comic from Marvel, you can jump into Fantastic Four and just really sink in deep. This run is also great for Fantastic Four fans who particularly like Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. While I feel like every character here gets pretty good amounts of character moments, those 2 are really the primary focus of the Hickman era, and for me, it's some of my favorites I've ever seen these characters interpreted. I think that seeing Hickman do his grand level storytelling across these 2 omnibuses, it's just something amazing to behold. It really stands out as one of my favorite Marvel comic runs of all time. It made me want to double down on how much I loved Hickman. I started with House of X Powers of 10, I believe, from him, went over here, and then I've just been a huge fan ever since. It's amazing. And I think if I could read this again for the first time, I would just relish the opportunity because I love seeing how he handled these characters. I think he made Fantastic Four cool again. I've always been a fan of this franchise, of this title, this characters, but Hickman just refreshed them in a new way. I think they were played so real, so authentic, and I think that the sense of stakes they had on the adventures, it just was never more intensive than I thought in this run. Really good stuff here. I think he really has a commanding grasp of science fiction kind of storytelling, and it's just really wonderful. I cannot believe this is a superhero book, and I definitely recommend it to fans out there. Next up on my list of 10 comics I wish I could read again for the first time, I have to include Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This is Omnibus Volume 1 of another 2-volume set that contains their entire run on Batman. I think for me, this is my favorite run for Batman that I've ever had the opportunity to read. I'm a gigantic fan of the Court of Owls, not only as a villain, but this whole story arc that kicks off their run. And to me, I could revisit it over and over again and get something new every single time. To have it in this oversized format in this omnibus is an absolute dream. I was so happy to upgrade earlier this year. But this omnibus itself includes a couple great story arcs like the Court of Owls. We have 0 Year, which is kind of a Batman origin story. We have Death of the Family, which is a great Joker story. And basically everything in this volume is just an absolute immediate recommendation from me. I wish I could read this again for the first time. People that watch my channel might also know I'm a huge fan of DC's New 52 era. I know it's a polarizing period, but it's when I really started collecting comic books for myself and really digging in deep. So I'm so nostalgic and fond of that era, and for me, there was no better title in the New 52 than this Batman book. And I honestly believe to read it again for the first time, I would like to believe that it would capture some of that magic that really got me foundationally hooked into this hobby. I know, again, it's one of my earliest, new on the stands books I picked up when I first really got into collecting. And because of that, it's always going to have a special place in my heart. And I think to this day, I still consider Court of Owls one of the best Batman stories of all time. And so that alone, if I could read that again for the first time, just wow, I don't even know what I would do. I know how affected I was the first time, just seeing all these kind of psychological layers to Scott Snyder's storytelling, the incredible, sometimes grotesque artwork of Greg Capullo, grotesque in a great way. I just was so bound into this storytelling. It's so incredibly immersive and interesting. Visually, it's just striking. It's really well paced, and I think that this is a great contender for one I would love to read, not only for the first time, but over and over and over again. Next on my list, I've got another Batman book coming at you, Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. This is the omnibus that includes all of their work together on Batman, and I love it. Today, though, I'm specifically talking about one of the entries in this omnibus, that being Batman the Long Halloween. For me, this is an early set Batman story. This is around the time, a lot of people consider this maybe year 2 of him being Batman. It's before Robin shows up on the scene. He's still newer to his role as Batman. Batman, still building some of those initial relationships with a lot of the supporting cast of characters. And to me, it is just one of the standout best Batman stories of all time. It is a, kind of maxi series that contains a really just murder mystery narrative. We have kind of a spree or serial killer on the loose in Gotham City who claims a victim every holiday throughout the calendar year. We start the story on Halloween, so the long Halloween, and it's just this spree as Batman tries to stop this killer. We also have a really cool alliance throughout this book, especially in the beginning, between Batman, Gordon, and Harvey Dent, who would later be Two-Face. The three of them really try to get together to find and stop this serial killer from claiming more victims, and it's just an outstanding storyline. Tim Sale delivers some of his best artwork in my mind that I've ever seen. Just seeing the way he stylizes the different Batman characters, it's just really iconic and interesting. The storyline can be read as an absolute standalone work, a great place for new people to check out Batman. In fact, it's one of my favorite books to recommend those that maybe want to try reading Batman after liking the movies or the animated stuff. I always try to recommend them The Long Halloween because I just think it holds up as one of the best. Being a murder mystery, though, knowing the twists and turns, it doesn't remove some of the joy from rereading this, but man, if I could pick a book to read again for the first time, something like this mystery in The Long Halloween would easily be near the top of my list. And to round out our list, Planetary by Warren Ellis and John Cassaday. This is the omnibus edition of their Planetary run here. It's another self-contained series. This is from DC Comics, initially published under Wildstorm, I believe. Anyway, it's another great science fiction series. It's not really a superhero narrative, although there's superhero kinds of characters in it. I would say it's first and foremost a science fiction series. It has a bit of kind of procedural feel where these guys are agents of this organization that kind of try to keep the universe together, I guess. They deal with just really weird existential threats throughout the world, and it's just a really kind of mysterious, interesting organization. The characters themselves are very cryptic and kind of unknowable, at least at first, and it's a really interesting cast of characters. I love the overall mythos here. It's in its own kind of universe as far as I know, and it's a great run. One of the things I love about this series is that it pays homage to so many different genres of fiction. We have kind of like a ghost kind of horror narrative that they kind of pay homage to. We have kind of a Tarzan kind of like wild sort of homage. We have a kaiju Godzilla-like homage. We have superhero homages throughout it. There's just so many different story arcs or issues that just pay tribute to all of these different genres or different kind of intellectual property or works. And I don't want to spoil too much in this video, but some of the homages are very overt and just you'll recognize it right away, like the Godzilla stuff, for example, but some are a little more subtle. But how they played with genre while not sacrificing their own specific voice is just really impressive to me. I think Warren Ellis absolutely delivers a tour de force series here in these pages. Cassaday's artwork has maybe never looked sharper. I loved my time reading this series. I went into it basically blind and I just loved it. I think all the twists and turns and the ultimate kind of culmination of the storyline, it was just so impressive. I cannot speak highly enough about it, and I certainly wish I could read it again with fresh eyes. And I think that's going to do it today for our 10 comics I wish I could read again for the first time list video. I would love to know in the comments, what are some comics you wish you could read again for the very first time? I think this would be a great way to get comic book recommendations to other readers, and even myself selfishly, I'm always looking for a great recommendation. But just think about it. A series that is so beloved to you, that you wish you could read again for the first time, could be your very recommendation in the comments that gets someone else to fall in love with this book. I would love to hear from more of you. Let me know what you think of my picks. Let me know what you think of this video format. Honestly, I had so much fun producing this video. This was a really great prompt that I did, like I said, in a short, but I wanted to remix it, do different picks, and just tackle it all over again with longer form content. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like and maybe share it with your friend or check out one of my other videos. Until next time, have a good one.